Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. Hope everybody is doing great. Okay, before we begin with the questions, let me see who all is on the live stream. I can see Rashmi Prakhar Gupta, Chat, DSP, Rudra, Dr. Atul, Tushar Kalburgi, Richard Savage, Yashvardhan Singh Chauhan, Rajil Khare, Agnibha Mukhopadhyay, Narendra, Om Prakash, Seven Truth, I blame Harsh, Bhushan, Jasman Raj Singh, Surendra Gupta, Khushi Sharma, Brahma Jadav, Parijat Dikshit, Bageshwar Army, Rio Mugen, Anupam Jaiswal, Sandhya, Fat Ripper, Aryan Thakur, Mr. Manik, Krishna Govinda, Alfred Ragunath from the Surinamese Netherlands, Geopolitical Dubai, Anand Sutram, Bibekananda Panda, Amanjot Singh, Vishnu Mohanan, Feminist Slayer, YK, Raghuveer Solanki, Dheeraj Kamath, Animish, Aru and Avyansh, Rio Mugen, Rahul Dunake, Alvin Rodriguez. Who all do we have? Who else do we have? I blame Harsh, Animish, Dr. Atul, Rashmi. Okay, we got those people. Sneha, Surendra Gupta, Aditya Kumar, Vardi 13, Tanmoy Chakrabarti, Pankaj, Tanmay Putane, Vishnu Gopi, Ajay Kanjani, Nikhil Guitar, Archis Mansen, PM, David Savage, and everybody else. Okay, I'm going to stop greeting you all, as always. So, in the past few live streams, some people have said rightfully that in live streams, sometimes questions get repeated, and certain questions aren't up to the high quality standards that we expect because, well, you can't expect everything. Expect me to be able to get the best questions uh, while answering questions on a live stream. So because of that, I have decided to take some questions from the comments, the questions that you've asked in the comments, and the others I will take from the live chat. So it's going to be a hybrid session. Some questions I'll take from the comments, and some questions, the rest I will take from the live chat that you are asking me right now. So let me begin by taking one question from the comments, and this is by Rajiv Agarwal 7047, and it's a request. If possible, please put short videos of every question that I answer, like I do with some questions. Okay, so it's there, but I suppose no one is aware of this. So let me put that on the screen. I have a separate channel called the Abhijit Chavda Clips channel, on which you will see that I put up all these clips of the questions that I answer. So it's all here. Uh, Typically, if I do a live stream today, within 5-6 days, all the questions will be. I'll start to put them up over here. So I put about 6-7 questions a day on this channel, and you will get uh, all the clips of the questions I've answered on this channel. So it's the Abhijit Chavda Clips channel. I have pinned that in the live chat. So if you're interested, if you don't have the time to watch the entire live stream, then you can go and check out the channel. You can subscribe to it if you wish, and the link to the channel is in the description at the bottom, and it's also pinned in the live chat. So check it out. So that solves this problem for those of you who don't have the time to watch an entire live stream, right? Okay, let's take some questions from the chat, live chat. Uh, Manthan Day says, what is India's biggest soft power right now, and how has the soft power changed over the years? So, yeah, there are two main kinds of power, right? Hard power and soft power. So let's first understand what's hard power very briefly. Hard power is your economic power and military power. That's essentially what it is, the combination of those two things. And there are other factors also, like your geographical area, your population, your power projection ability, how sovereign you are, how energy independent you are, all of that. But mainly it's your economic strength plus your military might. That's hard power. Now, what is soft power? Soft power is power that you use to get things done without compelling someone. So it's about, soft power is all about persuasion. It's all about your reputation. It's whether you are admired or not internationally, you as in your nation, right? So nations with high soft power are nations that are culturally very relevant, nations that are admired worldwide for various things, etc. For example, Korea is known for K-pop, and there are millions and billions of, not billions, but hundreds of millions of fans of K-pop worldwide, including young girls in India. Apparently, I'm not aware, but so that gives Korea a great reputation. And these people who admire K-pop and who are fans of K-pop will want to visit Korea, and they will hold Korea in high regard. Similarly, this Japanese manga, anime, all of that. Japan overall is a highly technologically advanced nation, very beautiful nation. So that uh, makes it rise in the estimation of a lot of people worldwide. So that is Japan's soft power. When it comes to the US, it's the number one nation in hard power. But even when it comes to soft power, elements like Hollywood, it it uh, it's a great persuasive tool. It's a great propaganda machine, Hollywood, isn't it? Then the US military industry, sorry, the music industry. Okay, that, I mean, everybody listens to English language music, American music, whatever, for whatever genres you are fond of, it's up to you. There is that. Then nations that perform well in sports. Okay, Jamaica is a tiny little country, but they have Usain Bolt, and that's why people, and they have their quartet, right? The relay team, the sprint relay team, that does really well. So nations that perform really well in sport, they are highly admired. You may not love those nations, but you admire them, you respect them for their achievements. So all of these are elements of soft power. So when it comes to India, what is our biggest soft power right now? Where is India admired? For what reasons is India admired, if it is? So overall, I would say that India doesn't, to be very honest, India doesn't have a great reputation worldwide. Okay, and some of it is because of propaganda. There's a lot of propaganda online these days that seeks to malign India, and people see India as a dirty nation. They still associate India with open defecation, because there's been a lot of hullabaloo in the past 5-10 years about ending open defecation and providing toilets to the entire population. So that has brought this previously existing problem to the forefront, that there used to be this problem in India, open defecation. So today people see India as that, as a nation where this happens. Well, it doesn't happen anymore. And then India is regarded as a nation that's very dirty and chaotic traffic and all that stuff, right? There's a lot of negative talk about India. But if you were to look at the positives, now that we have set the negatives aside and dealt with that, if you were to look at the positives, India's greatest and most potent um, element of soft power is its culture. We are the oldest known culture in the world, the longest continuously existing civilization in the world. The Western superhero genre has its roots and origins in the Indian epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. That those were the original superheroes, right? The great warriors, Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, Karna, and so on. All the great heroes of the Mahabharata and Ramayana. Those were the original superheroes. And even if you go beyond that, further back, gods like Lord Indra, etc., were these superheroes. Lord Indra is the god of the thunderbolt and the hammer, the template on which Jupiter and Thor were built. So our culture is our greatest soft power, but we are not leveraging that. Our culture manifests itself in so many ways. Our great temple architecture, the great monuments we have across the nation, or length and breadth of the nation, uh, our classical music, our theater forms, our classical dances and non-classical dances. This classical non-classical division in dances is artificial. I would say our indigenous traditional dances, folk dances, and what they class some people classify as classical dances, uh, or literature. But all of this is dying today. So the thing about culture is that you need to be prosperous to build culture, to create culture, to generate culture. uh, if you look at the European Renaissance, it happened it happened as a consequence of the great prosperity that Venice and Florence uh, achieved during the Middle Ages. It's only when these places became tremendously prosperous, that the Renaissance happened, the cultural Renaissance, the European Renaissance. And historically, India, the incredible cultural output of India was only possible because of the great wealth India used to have. And today, India is, a poor nation. Per capita GDP is very low. It's terribly low. Uh, and Without state support for Indian civilization decays. So right now, India's biggest soft power ought to be its culture, but there's nothing being done to promote culture. Uh, and promotion of culture and a new resurgence, efflorescence, renaissance of Indian culture will happen only when India becomes increasingly more prosperous. Of course, the government has departments and ministries and whatnot dedicated to culture, but they are not doing their job. Okay, to be very frank, to be very honest. So, India's biggest soft power ought to be India's culture. Culture is your big soft power. Also, if we become better and better at sport and we start achieving more in sport, then that's gonna be another element of our soft power. If India starts winning 20, 30 gold medals in the Olympics, then that transforms people's perception of the nation. So all of this put together is what constitutes soft power. India is doing a very poor job. Just making slogans like "Incredible India" is not going to transform India into an incredible nation. It's not going to transform India's soft power. The government needs to invest real money, non-trivial sums of money, into promoting Indian culture, tourism, etc. So that's not being done right now. And the ministries etc exist, but I'm not sure if they are being run properly. And I would say they are the worst performing ministries in India, the Ministry of Culture. And even education is soft power. Why do students want to go to the US or the UK or to Australia or wherever else? Because these nations have until recently they had excellent education systems, don't they? There was a time in the 70s, etc., when India had a reasonably good reputation in education, and people from African countries and Eastern Asian countries would come to India. Students would come to India to study, but that's not the case anymore. No one ever comes to India anymore. Instead, Indians go to even nations like Bangladesh and Ukraine and where not to study. So, education can be another element, very powerful element of soft power. If we have a genuinely excellent education system, then the whole world, students from the entire world will flock to you, like we had in the past, the great universities in India: Nalanda, Takshashila, Tilhara, Vikramshila, Odantapuri, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. We currently are a nation of low standards, and that's why we don't have too much soft power. The perception, the overall reputation of India is overall, especially in the West, it's kind of negative. Okay, and we need to change that. So that's the answer. That is the answer. Okay. Someone's asking me my opinions about some person. Listen, I don't talk about people. I don't talk about individual people. Let's talk about topics. Let's talk about issues. Let's talk about concepts. What's the point of discussing people? I don't discuss people. Uh, okay, Pranay Paul says Starlink's new system, direct to cell, enables internet connectivity for your mobile phone with no extra equipment or special app. Will Elon Musk succeed in beaming Starlink into India? Starlink is a matter of great concern for India. It's a matter of great concern. Why is that? Uh, Starlink gives a foreign power the ability to beam internet directly into India, directly to users, without any intermediary, without any government oversight, without any government regulation. Now, you would say, lots of people in the West, the libertarians, etc., would say that the less government interference you have and the less government roadblocks you have, the better it is for the people. Okay, great. But this is a foreign power. Elon Musk is not some individual in the US. He's the most powerful known person in the US. He probably is more powerful at this time than Donald Trump. And he's in charge of the Department of Governance, Government Efficiency, DOGE. His number one minion is going to be Vivek Ramaswamy, etc. Right? And they are saying that they're going after the deep state. Are you really sure about that? I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk actually is the tip of the iceberg of the deep state. And what he's doing is in a way spearheading America's transformation from a superpower to a hyperpower. Okay, he's gonna colonize Mars within the end, probably by the end of this decade. We're gonna have humans on Mars through SpaceX. So SpaceX is gonna transform the US from a superpower into a hyperpower. And Starlink is going to give the US unlimited 24 by 7 global surveillance capabilities. It's going to allow them to penetrate any nation, bypassing all government regulations. They're doing that in Brazil. And I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, Elon Musk, someone had asked Elon Musk about the Brazilian government's concern about Starlink. And he said that they can howl at the sky, which means that the government of Brazil can't do a thing about Starlink. And and in the past 3-4 years, he had tweeted and then later deleted that we will coup whoever we want. So to me, it's you guys may see it as circumstantial evidence. For me, it's pretty clear that Elon Musk is deep state, and he's going to end up being more powerful than the president of the US. Now, this guy's going to beam internet directly into India. And for some reason, the government of India seems to be going ahead with giving him approval for this. You know what happens? Let's say you have a bunch of ragtag foreign cookie terrorists in Manipur who are terrorizing the indigenous people of Manipur. Now, let's say some incident happens and the government imposes an internet blackout for 48 hours or whatever. That happens, right? But what if they have Starlink access? It completely defeats what the government is trying to do. That's what's been happening in Ukraine, right? Let's say you have some rioters, a bunch of rioters in some city, okay, and there's been a riot and lots of tensions, and the government imposes a cellular and internet blackout for 48 hours, and then these people use Starlink to communicate and coordinate and organize and plan and execute. What's the government going to be able to do? If the government of India goes ahead and gives Starlink the approval to operate in India, the government is essentially digging India's own grave. So I don't know what the Narendra Modi government is doing. I hope that whatever reports we are hearing are incorrect. I hope that Starlink is not allowed in India. I'm sure there's going to be arm twisting from the Americans. But if India is still a sovereign nation, then I think the government should not allow Starlink to operate in India. And like Pranay is saying, this direct to cell thing means that you take a cell phone and you have Starlink directly accessible to you, as long as you are outside somewhere. If you're indoors, you may not be able to receive it, but as long as you are under the open sky, let's say you are a cookie terrorist, let's say you are a rioter, let's say you are a separatist somewhere else, plenty of anti-national elements in India. Let's say you are one of the 100 million plus Bangladeshi infiltrators in India who are settled all across the country. You can use Starlink to organize, to coordinate, to plan and execute all kinds of stuff. Do we really want this? I think Starlink is a huge danger for India. I hope the government of India doesn't allow it to operate in India. Otherwise, we are saying goodbye to our sovereignty. SB Joker says India has overtaken UK, France, Germany, and Japan in GDP, but in terms of national wealth, India is still behind all these countries. Why is it so, and what can India do to become the wealthiest country in the world? Look, India is going to overtake Japan soon. So India is going to be soon, I think sometime next year, 2025, sometime next year, India is going to be the 4th largest economy. And then it will sooner or later, by 26 or 27, overtake Germany. So India will become the 3rd largest economy. Now, let's say India has a GDP per capita of, India has a total GDP per annum of, let's say, $5 trillion. $5 trillion. You divide that by India's population, which is 1.4 billion, and it will give you a very low number. So, despite having this very high GDP, India will soon be the top 3 or top 4. India, when it comes to GDP per capita, India is ranked way, way low, which means the living standards in India are very poor and the people are poor. Overall, the average person is quite poor compared to a person in Thailand, for example, or a person living in China, or a person living in the West, in the UK or Japan or the US or wherever. So that's the problem that India is facing. So the great thing is that we as a nation combine to have this gigantic economy, and as long as the economy keeps growing at whatever rate it's growing right now, whatever the current rate is, if it keeps growing like that, in the next 20-30 years, India is going to be one of the top 2 economies. So that's great. And once India reaches something that's, let's say, 15 trillion, 20 trillion, then it's going to be like 3 or 4 times. Then the per capita GDP will also be 3 to 4 times what it is now. So then India will become essentially a middle income nation, which would be great. So what does India have to do? What can India do to become the wealthiest country in the world? Well, India has to focus on manufacturing. Uh, India needs to stop exporting raw materials. India needs to start exporting finished products. Finished products are way more valuable than the raw materials that they are made of. So India needs to do something. India needs to become a manufacturing power. Now, we have been talking about Make in India for the past 10 years. I'm sure we have taken good steps in that direction, but we still have a lot to do and a long way to go to achieve our full potential. So I would say that the most important thing India needs to do is to becoming a major manufacturing power, which means that Indians should be encouraged to set up manufacturing plants and become entrepreneurs and all that, which means that the ease of doing business in India needs to be improved significantly, way better than what it is right now. Right now, it is not that easy to do business in India. I'm sure India is ranked 40th or whatever rank it is. Why aren't we ranked number one in ease of doing business? Or at least in the top 10. So that's something the government needs to work towards. So if we do that, then things will get easier. Interest rates need to be cut. A lot can be done. Okay, I'll not go into the details, but the crux of the issue is that we need to become a manufacturing power, a major manufacturing power. Ideally, as good, if not better than China. I know it's a big thing to aim for, but in 1992 or 1990, China, where was China in manufacturing? Nowhere. So if they could do it, why can't we do it? It's possible. But the government needs to get its act together. I'm sure they're working on it. Okay, let's take a question from the comments. So I haven't seen this today in the live chat. The Adani issue. So Shorts with Mobi says, ask Abhijit, allegations against the Adani group, Gautam Adani, in American courts. What impact will this have on Indian businesses internationally? Okay, so the some low ranking court, low level court in the US has issued a charge sheet or something against the Adani group, against Gautam Adani, saying that they have given bribes allegedly worth what, $500 million to government organizations or arms of the organs of the government in India. So the American court is saying that allegedly they are making the allegation that the Adani group gave bribes in India to various Indian government organs. Now, if let's assume hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, that this may allegedly have happened. Okay, hypothetically, it's happening in India, right? What business do the American courts have talking about India's internal matters? Do they believe that their laws are extraterritorial? They are applicable across the world, outside their territories? In that case, why do they keep on harping about the rules-based world order? The first principle, the foundational pillar of the so-called rules-based world order is national sovereignty and non-interference. That every nation will be completely sovereign, and the principle of non-interference is that no nation will interfere in the internal affairs of other nations. Every nation is free to manage its internal affairs on its own without external interference. That's the foundational pillar of the so-called Westphalian order, the rules-based world order. And the Americans think that they can now poke their fingers and noses into the internal affairs of other nations. So that's the kind of thing they're doing, and they will probably prosecute a case against Mr. Adani or whatever. I'm not sure what the course of action they're going to take is, but they're piling on the pressure against India now in this matter. Now, why is the Adani group important? The Adani group, it takes up international projects. And what kind of international projects does it take? It takes up international projects that are aligned with India's geopolitical interests. For example, the Adani group has purchased the port, purchased or taken control uh, for a certain number of years, the port in Haifa, Israel. It's an extremely important port. They uh, they manage mines, coal mines, and whatnot, other mines, and all kinds of such projects. Australia and other countries, and where not, that are important to India geopolitically. So, they are kind of working, and some of these projects that they are working on have a certain amount of Indian government share in that. So all these projects are important to India geopolitically. That's why the Adani Group is important to. It's essentially, you could say, a tool or an arm of India's geopolitical strategy to a certain extent. And it is not doing anything illegal. It is doing everything legally. Right? But now the Americans have done that, and the Kenyans have cancelled a big contract that they had awarded to the Adani Group. And there are, looks like there are certain, let's say, elements within India that are very pleased with what has happened. They are very pleased, and it looks like some of these elements may have linkages to foreign governments. Let's just put it like that. I'm not naming anybody, so okay, I'm not naming anyone, but there are lots of elements in India that seem to have very straightforward, clear linkages with foreign governments, maybe source of funding or whatever. And they seem to be working against the national interests of India. Now, there are a lot of influencers also who keep on demonizing Adani, and they play on the average Indian person's mistrust of wealth. Now, what do I mean by mistrust of wealth? In the 20th century, after 1947, the various regimes like the Nehruvian regime, etc., they imposed a very strictly socialistic form of government in India. The economic model was Fabian socialism. It was almost impossible to start a business in India. You had to get hundreds of approvals, and you had to negotiate all kinds of red tape. And even if you succeeded in starting a business in India, you had to allegedly pay bribes to all inspectors and babus and bureaucrats and politicians and whatnot. And the effect of that was that it was impossible to run a business profitably unless you were fortunate enough to have very high level connections, in which case you would pay off your high level connections and they would allow you to make a profit in a win-win kind of scenario. And these fortunate few who had the high level connections, they would go ahead and prosper, and they would treat their workers very poorly. In those days, it was very, very hard to gain employment in India. So if you were a worker in one of these factories or mills or whatever, then you would see that as a great blessing. And even if you are paid a pittance, you would do your best to hang on to the job, because otherwise you will be on the street. So they would exploit the workers terribly. So it was so it was natural for Indians to see anybody who was wealthy in the 20th century. It was natural for Indians to see them as probably being crooked. So if someone was wealthy, you would say, this guy must be indulging in some kind of skullduggery or some kind of corrupt activities. So, and therefore, so the overall thing was that it was impossible for a common, honest person to become even middle class in India. Okay, you would at best be lower middle class. And then you would have bureaucrats who would be doing government jobs and who would have all this wealth, bungalows and cars and whatnot. So in India, wealth was seen as something that was evil, and wealth was seen as something you could achieve only by being corrupt and crooked and evil. And that perception, unfortunately, still exists today. Now, today things have changed. Today it is possible for people to become wealthy without indulging in corruption. But those old attitudes still persist, and for good reason. Even today, if you see bureaucrats and politicians who have these, I don't know what before elections, the politicians have to declare their wealth, right? The minimum amount of wealth will be 20, 30 crores for a random local politician. How on earth does a politician acquire so much wealth, right? And then you have bureaucrats today also, allegedly some. Okay, I'm not saying all politicians either, but a lot of bureaucrats have wealth that is hard to account for. It's beyond their income, right? So that's why even today people see wealth as something evil. If you are wealthy, it means that you must have done something crooked, something corrupt. And that's why when people like Ambani, Adani get really really wealthy, people see them as being the epitome of whatever, they can't see them as being honest individuals. So that's why there is a lot of let's say misinformation out there. I think Mr. Adani is a reasonably self-made man. He has, you know, put in all the hard yards. He has paid his dues, I'm pretty sure. Uh, and whatever projects he is doing are in synchronicity with the Indian national interest. So I think we should support him and support the Adani group because it's good for India. Uh, but yeah, this is the situation that we are facing right now. That the Adani group has been, the Americans have opened a case against it, and they have alleged that they have paid bribes. And maybe the Americans could go after other Indian businesses that are also in synchronicity with the Indian interest. Okay, so as long as you are a business person and you're not doing something that helps India, they will leave you alone. But if you are a big business person and you are operating projects that are helping India directly or indirectly in a geopolitical manner, they're going to target you. That's what you will face. But if you're a person of Indian origin and doing your own business and it has nothing to do with India, then you will be left alone. That is how it's going to be played. Okay. Uh, okay, where was this? Allegation on Adani will result in loss of trust on Indian business. We'll see about that. McLevin says, "Did you see the Neeraj Goyat fight? No one said that no one is talking about him." Yeah, so Netflix, right? That horrid Netflix live stream that was there was a very poor live stream. It was impossible to watch, especially during the Tyson versus Jake Paul, Logan Paul, one of those two guys. That fight, Jake Paul probably, and in the run up to the fight, there were three or four other fights, and Neeraj Goyat fought some guy, I forget his name, and he won. So yeah, it's good that he won. It was a professional fight, and he defeated his opponent. So good on him, and hope to see him do better going forward. And yeah, people were all hyped up about the Mike Tyson fight, so no one was talking about this. But I'm glad you noticed that. Okay, what other questions? I don't do Indian politics. I have no idea. Okay, see, I mean, I appreciate you asking me this question, but I am no expert on Indian politics. I don't follow Indian politics. I don't see the seat share and vote share and all that. I have no idea. I look at international relations, geopolitics, not in Indian politics. I never comment about Indian politics because I'm no expert. So I won't be able to answer this question. Sorry about that. Uh, Khusro Anushirvan says, "Who's your favorite mathematician and theorem?" That's a great question. So many great mathematicians: Leonard Euler, um, Grigori Perelman, who's still alive. Obviously Srinivas Ramanujan, so many more. Probably my favorite mathematician would be Ramanujan because he was like Hardy, also the guy who, from the Western perspective, the guy who discovered Ramanujan. Uh, he was another great mathematician, but he considered himself a nobody compared to someone like Ramanujan. According to him, Ramanujan was the greatest of all, and he wrote about this in his book, his autobiography, and the autobiography is called "A Mathematician's Apology." Hardy. Hardy and Littlewood, his most frequent collaborator. So I would say probably my favorite mathematician would be Ramanujan in the modern era. Of course, you had lots of ancient mathematicians, Madhav of Sangramagam, uh, Nilakantha, Bhaskaracharya, Brahmagupta, so many more. Pingala. Uh, Pingala is the guy who came up with the so-called what's it called? Fibonacci series. The Fibonacci series is the Pingala series. Okay, it's not the Fibonacci series. It's the Pingala series, and so on. My favorite theorem. There are so many theorems. Okay, the first time I understood what people meant about beauty in mathematics was when I saw the Maclaurin series. I was probably in student. The Maclaurin series. What is the Maclaurin series? It's incredibly beautiful. I mean, that's the first time I could understand what people meant by the beauty of mathematics. So let's try and Google it quickly. Maclaurin's series, in case you wanna understand what I mean by that. So let's go to our friend Google, and let's Google Maclaurin series. Okay, so we can go to Wolfram Math World, and this one, right? It's a Taylor series expansion of a function about zero. So f of x is f of 0 plus f prime of 0, which is the first derivative of the function around 0, plus the second derivative around 0 divided by 2 factorial times x squared, and so on and so forth. It's incredibly beautiful. The first time I saw beauty, and I understood that mathematics is indeed beautiful. So maybe that's the one I would say. I mean, it's actually a pretty rudimentary kind of theorem. The Taylor series is the real deal. But yeah, if you want to ask me, that the first time I glimpsed beauty for the first time in mathematics, that was the Maclaurin series, the Maclaurin theorem, whatever you want to call it. Okay, let's see some more questions. Karthik Iyer says, do you think the deep state wants to depopulate the world? Well, that globally, if you look at the global TFR overall, it's declining for sure. For some countries, it is pretty high. I believe in Israel, the TFR is significantly above 2.1. In various African nations, the TFR, total fertility rate, is way above 2.1. But in all industrialized countries and industrializing countries, the total fertility rate is dropping. In Europe, it must be around 1.5. So the total fertility rate is the number of children the average woman has in her lifetime in a nation. So let's say you have a nation with 100 million people, okay, hypothetically. Out of that, let's say there are 50 million women. Then the total fertility rate is, if it is 2, it means that these 50 million women will each have on average 2 children. And you need a TFR of 2.1 for whatever your population currently is to be sustained. If the TFR drops below 2.1, the population starts declining. So it starts dropping over time, slowly, gradually. If your total fertility rate is 1.5, that's dangerous. If it is, so it's almost crisis-like. In nations like Japan, it's 1.2 or something. In Korea, it's disastrous. It's around 1. China also, it is 1.1 or 1.2, which is another disaster. In India, it's become 2.0. In some states, it is 1.7, 1.6. India is facing an impending crisis if this continues. Now, some people will say that India's population is too high. We need to decrease it. I agree. 1.4 billion is way too much for India. The ideal population is about 300 million, which we used to have historically. But you can't suddenly drastically drop your TFR. The population will start dropping, but the average age of the population will start increasing. Do you want to have a country where the average person is 60 years old? Do you understand how disastrous that is? So if you want to drop your population to a reasonable level, let's say 500 million or 300 million, that needs to be a 2-century long project. You can't do it in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It has to be a 2-century project. You have to do it very gradually. Otherwise, you will be facing disaster. China is going to face it, demographic disaster. So lots of nations are facing this. The total fertility rate has dropped drastically, especially in nations where you have this extremely hard work ethic. Work 100 hours a week. Don't take days off. If you work 100 hours a week, or let's say 70 hours a week, okay, some people say Indians should work 70 hours a week. I'm okay with that. But understand, if the husband and the wife both work 70 hours a week, they're going to be exhausted. Will they have the energy to procreate? Or even if they manage to procreate, who's going to take care of their kids in the metropolitan cities where you have nuclear families? So because of that, the TFR is decreasing in metropolitan cities and states which have higher incomes. In places like Korea, where people work like crazy, the total fertility rate has declined drastically. Same with Japan, and the same in various European nations. In the US, they're gonna offset that by bringing in migrants. So I don't know about whether the deep state is doing this, but one of the side effects of a capitalist economy is dropping TFR. Is that the TFR drops? In a capitalist economy, it's all about profits, quarter upon quarter profits. Every quarter you need profits, otherwise the state shareholders will drop your shares. So if you pursue quarter upon quarter profits infinite profits on a finite planet, you will destroy the planet and you will also destroy your population. So I don't know if it's a deep state or whatever. I don't know if it's a conspiracy of sorts. There could be other elements that people talk about. I'm aware of the mRNA elements and all that, but the overall thing we are seeing is that the world is going to see a population collapse if things continue the same way. I don't know if the deep state is behind that. Okay, I don't have sufficient evidence to point in one direction or the other, but this is certainly something that is happening. A population decline. Elon Musk says it's population collapse. I think he's talking about an asymptotic solution, population collapse over the next 30, 40, 50 years. But in the next 10, 20 years, you're going to see declining populations. Over a 50-year horizon, you may see population collapse also, which is not good, because then you will be left with nations where the average person is an elderly person. Then who's going to run the economy? Who's going to continue? Who's going to carry the flag forward into the future? There's going to be no one left. So that's why we need to be very careful about these things. It's okay to work really hard, but you got to have kids and take care of these kids well and raise them well. Geopolitical Dubey says, how did ancient Egyptians have so much gold and wealth? There were no gold mines, farming, or crude oil production at the time. What did they use to trade? I'm not very familiar with the Egyptian economy. They do not have so much gold or wealth. If you compare ancient Egypt with ancient India, the Indian GDP of the time would have dwarfed the Egyptian GDP. Okay, this is a good opportunity to take a look at the map. So where is our friend the map? Yes, where's the map? Here's the map. Understand this. Let's say we are talking about 2000 BC or 3000 BC. Okay, let's say we're talking about 3000 BC. So the Egyptian empire was from about 3000 BC to about 332 BC when Alexander destroyed it or conquered it. So let's say we are talking about 2500 BC. It's the time when we had the Saraswati Sindhu phase of our history. Very large population we had in northern and western India. And we had Egypt. So Egypt, the Egyptian civilization was centered around just one river, the Nile. Everything else in Egypt is desert. Understand this. There's only one tongue of green. And the entirety of Egyptian civilization was based around this one river. The population was low. It wasn't a large population. And the overall wealth was nothing compared to the wealth that India had. Okay. So I would not agree that Egypt had incredible amounts of wealth and gold and all that. They were a good, reasonably powerful empire. They fought the Hittites, they fought the Mitanni, they fought the Hyksos, they fought everybody else, and they were the major power in the region. There were no other empires of any consequence or significance in the region beside the Egyptians. And if they had gold, they would probably be sourcing it from other parts of Africa, and perhaps through trade with other geopolitical entities like the Mitanni, the Hittites, and whoever else, probably India as well, because India has to trade with them. We have Indian Zebu cattle in Egypt around 2000 BC. So it would probably be through trade. India acquired most of its gold through trade with other countries. We would sell them our spices and finished products, finished products like textiles and all kinds of other things, and they would give us gold. So generally, if a nation doesn't have gold mines but it has gold, it means it's acquiring it through trade or through force from somewhere else. Okay, either through trade or by conquest, by force. Now, for example, Well, let me give you an example that is a little controversial. It will upset some people, but it is what it is. Does France have any gold mines? France has no gold mines, but they have a tremendous amount of gold. Where does the gold come from? The gold comes from Western Africa, where all these countries have gold mines, but they don't they don't keep any of the gold. It all goes to France. It's called neo-colonization. So I'm not an expert on the Egyptian economy, okay, but you they would have either have acquired it by trading with other nations or by conquest. You conquer a country which has gold mines, and you extract the gold and you acquire that. Those are the two ways. So it would probably be a combination of both. But in Africa, gold is found in Western Africa. I'm not sure if the Egyptians had contacts all the way to Western Africa. Africa is a gigantic continent. So probably through trade or conquest, they did conquer various other kingdoms in various times and so on. Okay. Tres Comas says, could AI crack time travel since it literally can access data from any point in recorded history? Can it figure out possible future timelines? See AI systems, they can access whatever you make available to them. If you give an AI system access to the internet, then it can access whatever is available in the public domain, which means not behind a paywall or any other wall. There will be data that is not available on the internet. There will be data that's safeguarded. There will be data that's firewalled. It can't access that unless it has figured out how to crack everything. Okay, hack into everything, which could be possible, but maybe not. Let's say you have data in a vault that is air gapped. There's no way AI can access that. And there are lots of ancient texts, etc., manuscripts, and so on that have never been digitized. They only exist in physical form, and they're crumbling. Let's say in India we have several million many ancient manuscripts, etc., that are written on palm leaves and all that are crumbling away in the Indian archives, and nobody gives a damn about that. I mean, from the ASI, from the historian perspective, no one cares. They just don't care that our heritage is wasting away. So AI can't access that. So AI has access to a limited subset of the overall data that exists worldwide, not all the data, a smaller subset of the actual amount of information that exists. But AI learns, and AI can certainly make inferences and so on. So based on whatever data is available to it, can AI crack time travel? To crack time travel, you have to, well, that's a problem in physics. And according to some solutions to the Einstein field equations in general relativity, time travel may be theoretically possible, but practically it's not possible. Practically, because we don't have the technology to do what is required. We don't have the ability to create wormholes, and if we even have a wormhole, we don't have the ability to keep them open because they want to snapshot. The neck wants to snapshot the throat of the wormhole. For that, you would need exotic matter, like matter with negative mass, or something even weirder than that, which is those primordial cosmic strings, which we have never observed. If you have that, then you could keep a wormhole open, and and then you would need relativistic travel, and then you may have certain situations in which you may end up at a different point in time. That sort of thing. Okay, I'm just giving you a very, very cursory view of what the theory is. So this is a physics problem. Time travel is a physics problem. It's not about accessing ancient data. For AI to be able to crack time travel, you would need a very intelligent AI. So we may soon be at a point where some of these AI systems could become AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is the equivalent of a human being with, let's say, 130, 140 IQ, which is a reasonably intelligent human being. So those AI systems could conceivably think on their own and solve problems that have never been solved before at the level of a person with 130, 140 IQ. That's artificial general intelligence. With AGI, you can't solve time travel, because if that was the case, then anybody with 130, 140 IQ who applies himself or herself in physics for a certain amount of time, 10, 20, 30 years, will be able to solve the problem. But time travel is not that sort of problem. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, won't be able to solve it. But then there's another stage of AI, which is ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. And that is the equivalent of a person with maybe 350 or 500 IQ. Such humans don't exist. If you have that sort of IQ, then you can solve problems that you can't even imagine. That sort of AI may solve time travel and may make it possible. It may allow you to create wormholes and keep them open and so on and so forth. So if ASI happens, it may solve the problem of time travel, possibly. It may be able to create technologies that appear to us like magic, technologies that are deep in the realm of science fiction. Only ASI can do it. AGI can't do it. So we may or may not have ASI right now. Look, in the public domain, you have what Anthropic AI and Claude AI and Chat GPT AI and Perplexity AI and Grok AI. All these things. These are like children's toys. It's like a stunted, toned down version of the real AI that exists. They give you a small flavor of it. The real power of the AI that exists currently is currently being used by the US government. They are using the full version of the AI. Whatever is available in the public domain is just like 2 or 3% of the real capabilities. So they won't give that access to excuse me. They won't give access to that to people like us, to the ordinary people. So it's possible that AGI may already have been achieved in secret. And the next step is ASI. So I don't know if it's like these UFOs that you see in the US. I don't think they're aliens. I think that's advanced technology that is secret. Similarly, there'll be that sort of technology in the realm of AI, which will be secret and which will not be revealed to the public. So such AI systems could be able to crack certain problems, maybe even time travel if it is an ASI system. And such systems may possibly be able to figure out possible future outcomes, not guaranteed future outcomes, but possible future outcomes. And they may be able to assign various probabilities to these various outcomes and tell you what is the most likely outcome. It's like playing a game of hyper chess. In chess, you have 64 squares, right? And grandmasters can think 10, 15 moves in advance, can think ahead 10, 15 moves. But an ASI system could think ahead 10 raised to 15 moves, one with 15 zeros after it. That sort of thing. So, yeah, there we have it. Okay, let's take another question from the comments. And this is a question by Mr. 88ers. How did Russia retain the permanent seat in the UN Security Council when the USSR disintegrated? Didn't the West or the USA try to block Russia? I mean, they had the opportunity to run the agenda that UNSC permanent seat belongs to the sovereign state of the USSR, and Russia is a totally different state or something like that. So what really happened? This is an excellent question. How come nobody has asked me this question before? How come nobody has asked me? So what happened? We know, I hope we know, that the USSR collapsed in late 1991, right? Late 91 is when the USSR collapsed. And the various Central Asian republics declared independence. Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, blah, 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 all these nations, okay? And they formed something called the Commonwealth of Independent States, the CIS. And there were 12 members of the CIS. So, in late 1991, 11 out of these 12 CIS member states, they signed a declaration. And they said that the member states of the CIS agree. They don't agree. They support Russia in taking over the USSR membership in the United Nations, including permanent membership in the Security Council. So they signed this, and then the United Nations agreed to have Russia replace the USSR, and then things continued the way they did. Now there have been questions about the legality of all this and all, but it by the time it was a fait accompli, and it was just already done. So it's because the CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States, 11 out of the 12 members supported Russia as a replacement for the USSR. That's why Russia became Russia retained, or Russia took over the USSR's permanent seat in the UN Security Council. Now, the good question over here is that why did the US or the West not try to block Russia? Excellent question, right? And that's what makes this question interesting. Who cares about these small nations? I mean, small and mostly powerless nations signing this memorandum or whatever. So what? If the big daddy, the US, vetoes this proposal, then it's all over, right? Because in the UN Security Council, just one person, one member out of the five vetoing something is game over. So, what really happened? This happened. Russia was able to do this only because the US was okay with it. See, what happened when the USSR disintegrated is that Mikhail Gorbachev lost power. The nation disintegrated. And what was left was Russia, the Russia that we have today. And Gorbachev lost power. And who came to power? Boris Yeltsin. And Boris Yeltsin and Gorbachev are both seen as US stooges. Okay. After the USSR disintegrated, Gorbachev appeared in a Pizza Hut commercial saying that, the USSR has gone, so what? We have great American pizza now. Let's enjoy it. And Boris Yeltsin, what he did was that he destroyed the Russian economy. To summarize everything in just one sentence, okay, he was instrumental in destroying the Russian economy. So he was essentially a US asset. So when you have a nation, newly created nation, with your asset running it, why will you not allow that nation to uh, join, to gain the USSR's permanence in the UN Security Council? So I'm sure it was not a good move even at that time, even if their puppet was in power in the USSR, because long term, who knows? But I think at that point in time, the US was going through this moment of hubris. This was the great unipolar moment. They had won the Cold War. They had defeated the USSR. At that point in time, they probably thought they are invincible. And that's why they made the mistake of allowing Russia to take over the USSR's permanent seat in the UN Security Council. I'm pretty sure that it's considered to be a mistake now. But that is what happened. And then, as we know what happened later in history. Boris Yeltsin was a drunkard and a very bad president who did lots of blunders. He lost the first Chechen war. And eventually he was replaced by an unknown guy called Vladimir Putin. And then the rest is history. So this is a great question. All right. Okay, I will not take Manipur questions today. I have spoken a lot about it. And there's no serious progress in it. So what's the point? I'll not discuss Manipur today. I know people are asking. I appreciate your questions, but I have spoken a lot about it. Once again, let me remind you that where is that? Let me remind you all that about the live about the short clips channel. So I have a short clips channel called Abhijit Chavda Clips, and you can see the previous questions I've answered on that channel. If I can find it, it's over here. Once again, in case many of you have joined later, this is the short clips channel. All the questions I answer on these live streams, these are chopped up into individual questions and answers, and they are put up on this channel, the Abhijit Chavda Clips channel. So you have this question from episode 217. This is a question from episode 218. This is from 217, and you will have questions from other episodes, 214 here. This is also 214, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in case you want to see my previous answers, you can find them here. I'm pretty sure there are questions about Manipur here, Cookie Land for Christ over here, and so I've spoken in depth about these matters. So you can find all of that over there. Okay, now let's take some other questions. Okay, let's see what else. Prash- Prashasya Gautam says, what kind of role did the Nazis play in the formation of NASA and NATO? Is it true that US used Nazi intelligence to counter the Soviets? So after the end of the Second World War, a bunch of these high-ranking Nazi officers, members of Adolf Hitler's inner circle, etc., where well, obviously they were captured, they were arrested, they were put on trial, the Nuremberg trials, and a whole bunch of them were hanged over there, hanged as a consequence of being found guilty of various crimes, various war crimes. That happened, but many of them were not punished, and many of them went on to play significant roles in NATO, in NASA. So let's go to our friend Google one more time. Where is Google? And let us Google a couple of people. One is Adolf Heusinger. Who is this gentleman, Adolf Heusinger? The former Inspector General of the Bundeswehr. Um, this guy was a German military officer whose career spanned the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, West Germany, and NATO. Da, 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 he served as the chairman of the NATO Military Committee from 1961 to 64. Okay. Uh, he was the operations chief within the general staff of the high command of the Nazi German army in the Wehrmacht from 1938 to 1944. So this guy was a clear Nazi, and he became the chairman of the NATO military committee. Can you believe that? Yes. Here he is with the US Foreign Secretary Robert McNamara in Washington D.C. 1964. Isn't that interesting? NATO, Adolf Heusinger. That's just one example. Okay, let's Google another guy. What was his name? Saturn. I forget the guy's name. He's a very, very, very famous name. Saturn V Chief Engineer. Saturn 5. Werner von Braun, the great man, the pioneer, the father of the rocket and of modern rocketry. Great rocket engineer, Werner von Braun. So this guy, well, he worked for the Nazis. He was the guy who developed the first ever cruise missile. Okay. And also the first ever ballistic missile. The first cruise missile was what? The V1, I believe. A career in Germany. Experimented cruise missile. Okay, the V1 and the V2 were the V2 is the first ballistic missile, and the V1 or the Bumble what Doodlebug V1. Where is the V1? There's no V1 here. Doodlebug. Okay. So he developed the V1 and the V2 rockets. Great rocket scientist. Eventually, he was captured by he surrendered to the Americans. He was taken prisoner essentially. He was moved to the United States, and he eventually became the head of NASA. Okay, let's see what it says here. Okay, space architect, etc., and a pioneer. What does it say about his career in NASA? Uh, he was the chief architect of the Saturn V super heavy lift launch vehicle, and so on. What was his career in NASA? He was the boss in NASA, wasn't he? So this is him in NASA with his rockets and so on. So that's another guy, Werner von Braun. So when it comes to NASA pioneered the entire American space program. They did it with German technology. It was all German technology. The Americans developed none of this technology from scratch. They captured a bunch of German missiles. They moved them, shipped them to the United States, captured a bunch of German rocket engineers, such as Werner von Braun and his people. And these guys are the ones that created the American space program. When it comes to NATO, a bunch of Nazis in there, at least one we know of, Adolf Heusinger. So very interesting history. And yeah, That's the history. Okay, now let's take another question from. One second. Okay, let's take a question from the comments once again. So this is by TechWise 360. Where do you see the Russians in the next few months as the West has crossed the red line by supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles and using them against Russia? Look, the Ukraine war has now seemingly entered a new phase. The West has the Biden regime, which is a lame duck regime because they've lost the election and Trump is going to be in power, in office at least, from January something onwards, 21 or something onwards, in a couple of months. So the Biden regime is a lame duck regime. Biden is a lame duck president. Uh, they are currently transitioning. They are doing the transition to the Trump regime. And despite being a lame duck regime that has lost the elections, they are going ahead and pouring fuel on the fire in Ukraine. So they have given the go ahead to Ukraine for using long range American missiles. And the Russians say that the Ukrainians don't have the ability to use these missiles, which means that you will need American technicians on the ground who will operate the missiles and actually send them off, fire them. But yeah, such missile strikes have already started. There is a new phase in the new escalation in the war. I think the Russians will not take any drastic action, any very drastic measures until Trump comes to power, and then they will probably be expecting that Trump will negotiate with them and seek to find ways and solutions that will lead towards an end to this war or some kind of ceasefire. So I think the Russians will try and wait it out. And in the meanwhile, it looks like the Biden regime will try their best to instigate the Russians to escalate by escalating themselves. So I think the next couple of months are going to be very dangerous because the Biden regime seems to be hell bent on instigating nuclear war. So I think the Russians, despite whatever is being said about Putin and Russia in the Western media, I think the Russians are super sane. They're very logical people. Putin is a very logical, rational, sane person. He understands what the Biden regime wants to instigate him into doing, and he will make sure that he doesn't allow them to succeed. So, yeah, that's the kind of stage of the war that we are in. Okay. Some other questions. I saw something somewhere. I think there was a question about, I don't know, where is it? Okay, let's go back to that question itself. Okay, not this one. This one, right? And a continuation of that is that Russia allegedly used an ICBM just a few days ago against Ukraine. So the Ukrainians, with American help, American help and American approval, they targeted sites in Russia with American long-range missiles, and Russia responded by launching at least one ballistic missile attack against Ukraine. Now, the media reported that this was an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, let's take a look at the map. Okay. Here's Ukraine and here's Russia. Now, intercontinental missiles have a range in excess of 8,000 kilometers. Now, let's say you are launching a missile from, let's say, some position like this here, Saratov Oblast, or wherever it was. What location was it? I don't remember right now. But you see, if you want to hypothetically target a place in the interior of Ukraine, then that's just about 500 or so kilometers from reasonably within Russian territory. So for targeting a location that's 500, 600, 700, let's say 1,000 kilometers away, You don't use an intercontinental ballistic missile. That's a waste of a missile. Those missiles are insanely expensive. You don't use an ICBM for that. You use a medium range missile. So Putin later went ahead and gave a statement that they had used a new medium range ballistic missile to target Ukraine. It's a new experimental developmental test of the missile. I forget the name of the missile, it's in Russian, but it's an intermediate or medium range ballistic missile. And apparently, it may have had MIRVs, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. So one missile with 5 packages or 10 packages in it. So a missile that carries multiple warheads and can target each warhead independently of the others. That sort of thing. Now, ballistic missiles can be used to deliver regular payloads as well as nuclear payloads. In this case, it was obviously not nuclear payloads. It was just regular low explosive payloads, because I saw the footage. It was not like big explosions. It was about sending a message, not to Ukraine but to the US. And apparently, there is a hotline between Russia and the US, and the Russians used it just a few minutes before the launch, just before the launch, and they informed the Americans in advance that we are going to do this, and this is a non-nuclear missile. It's not going to have nuclear warheads, but we're just informing you so that there is no unnecessary escalation or panic. So the Russians have taken this measure, which demonstrates that they have options in the escalation ladder. They don't have only one option, which is tactical nuclear warheads. They have a multiplicity of options, and they have a new missile that they can use, new ballistic missile that they can use. So yeah, this is an escalation in the war. The Americans are trying their best to send us headlong into nuclear war, but the Russians, I think they are holding firm, and hopefully once Trump comes in power, things will change, and hopefully the war ends in some kind of ceasefire. Hopefully. Okay. What else? Feminist Slayer says, did studying history full of deceit, selflessness, and war ever make you feel disheartened about human nature and the world? How did you cope with these harsh truths and the red pill awakening? Look, you will be disheartened if you have certain illusions about human nature, if you have a utopian, idealistic view of human nature, if you imagine or if you believe that human nature is all about good and peace and non-violence, and then you read history and you see the opposite, then you will be disheartened, disillusioned, etc. For me, I have never had these qualms about human nature. I've never had these I've never had these wrong ideas about human nature. I have always been a realistic person. I've always understood that human nature is complex, it's complicated, and I've been reading history since I was a kid, and I always saw that history is mainly about warfare. So that tells us that human nature hasn't changed in thousands of years. We have always been that way, and we are still that way, and we will probably remain that way. It's just part of what we are. That's human nature. I think it's genetically wired into us because of the harsh realities of the evolutionary process, sink or swim, survival of the fittest, and all that you have to compete for survival. So yeah, so that's part of human nature. So I am very much aware that human history is full of deceit, like you say, deceit, selflessness, and war and violence. It's never made me feel disheartened. It's just what it is. It's just a fact. It's just a reality. What's there to be disheartened about? Of course, we can aspire to be better than that. And there have been times in human history where we have had civilizations that have been civilized in the sense that even during warfare there would be rules, and such civilized behavior and such rules eventually led to these civilizations being defeated. I'm talking about us, obviously, India, right? I mean, in India, when two kingdoms would go to war, They would never touch civilians. They would never touch farmers. It was always soldiers fighting soldiers. In the rest of the world, in Europe, the civilians are fair game. Uh, there's this guy. His name was Guillaume. He was known. Pardon my French. He was known as William the Bastard. Okay, and he was a Norman duke. He was the fourth or fifth or whatever Duke of Normandy. And we're talking about the 11th century. He was an illegitimate child, and he became the duke because his father did not have any other option. So he had to make an illegitimate son his successor as the Duke of Normandy. So this guy William the Bastard, in his 50s, he assembles a fleet of ships and a reasonably big army, and he crosses the English Channel, crosses from Normandy into England, across the English Channel, invades England, gets really lucky and defeats the English king, Harold. And he becomes the king of England. And from then onwards, he's known as William the Conqueror. And this was the Battle of Hastings. Hastings or Stamford Bridge? Hastings, Battle of Hastings. 1066 AD. Now, this guy, William the Conqueror, was known as a very pious man, etc. Now, as he grew older, for some reason, he became really fat. And he had a really, really big tummy. Okay? Happens. Now, his overlord in France, when he was Duke, was the King of France. And the King of France made a really distasteful joke about William the Conqueror. He compared William the Conqueror to a woman who is pregnant. Very distasteful joke. So William got really offended. Really, really offended. And he crossed over into France. He invaded France. And let me show you where this happened, okay? There's a city called Mont. Where is Mont? It's in France. Let's go out, zoom in. Okay. This is where Mont is, okay? So he comes to the city of Mont, which is a nice, pretty city with nice landmarks and all. And he sacks the city and he has everybody killed. He burns the church and the people inside the church. And he said it is fair game because these people who I'm killing are part of the insult that was offered to me. So this happened in Mont. Now, when the city was burning, a flying piece of coal came and his horse stepped on it. And because of the pain, his horse reared up on its hind legs, and the pommel of the saddle, it pressed into William's stomach and burst his bowels. And this led to his excruciatingly painful death a few days later. That's how William the Conqueror died. And I showed you where this happened, in the city of Mont. Now, his actions are brutal, barbaric, but part of the rules of war in Europe, in that culture, in Christendom. It's part of the culture that if another country's king insults me, I have the right to go and fight him, which is fine. But I have the right to kill the citizens of that country, because they are part of the insult that was offered to me. So if you study history, you will come across so many examples like these. And that is just the harsh reality of human nature and warfare. And we in India we tried to live by different rules. And those rules, because our kings adhered to them unquestioningly and blindly, even when faced with barbarians, that's why we got defeated. If Prithviraj Chauhan had been ruthless, and if other Rajput kings and other kings had been ruthless and treated the barbarians like animals, not like civilized people, then the outcomes would have been different. So the point is, we should be aware of human nature. We should be aware of what others are capable of. And don't let that make you feel disheartened. Well, it's just what it is. Facts are facts. Facts don't care about anyone's feelings. So there we have it. Okay, Ajay Sharma says, I once got the chance to meet an ex-KGB agent in his 60s, and he told me that they have documents that show that Hitler was put in regime by the British. Any thoughts? Look, I don't know. I have not seen anything that points in that direction directly. There are some coincidences. In Vienna, there was a time when Hitler and various other people, Karl Marx, etc., they were all living a few 100 meters from each other in one place. There are some coincidences like that, but I'm not sure about this claim that Hitler was brought to power by the British. I'm not sure about that. Okay. Um, okay. Dhruv's game says, "What do you think about Sigmund Freud? What is he even famous for? The most famous theory of psychosexual evolution has no empirical evidence. What should one do with interest in psychology study?" Um, there's gonna be people who don't like what I say. I think psychology is voodoo. Psychology is all assumptions. Some of it may work to a certain extent. Look, psychology is about studying what? Your mind, right? It's about understanding the mind. Now, we know for a fact that our mind doesn't reside in our ear or our nose or in our thumbs, right? Or any other part of the body. The mind resides here in the brain. We know that. So, the organ we are studying is the brain. Now, when you have psychological, psychiatric problems or whatever, um, do they scan your brain? No. Do we even know properly where feelings and thoughts and behavioral patterns arise from? What part of the brain? We're not quite sure. We know roughly that sound, that's the sensory cortex does certain things, that there is an olfactory part of the brain, there is an auditory part of the brain. We know where vision is processed. The optic nerves, they go behind and cross over like this and then go into the visual cortex and so on. We know roughly where these things happen, but thoughts, feelings, emotions, behavioral patterns, how do those arise, and why do they go wrong at times, and why do certain people have certain issues? We have no idea, we have no clue. So when you have a fracture, you're gonna get an x-ray and get your arm or whatever portion of your body is fractured, you're gonna have it scanned and then you can fix it. If you have heart disease, for example, they're gonna scan your heart and do that injected dye into your vein and see where the blockages are and all that. And so the same goes for other parts of the body. You get CT scans done and sonography done and various kinds of imaging and all that. When it comes to the problems of the mind, we don't map the brain. We don't study the brain of the person that is the patient. So all these theories that Sigmund Freud came up with and other people came up with, most of these theories lack empirical evidence. And that's why psychiatry, psychology, etc. Psychology is still something that's okay, but psychiatry is something that is mostly voodoo. Psychology is a set of empirical behavioral patterns that we see, which kind of makes sense. But psychiatry is voodoo, not psychology, but psychiatry. Um, and most of these theories that people like Sigmund Freud, etc., came up with, those they have absolutely no empirical evidence that validates them. Uh, so that's what I can say. If you are interested in psychology, then I I'm not sure. I am no authority in the field of psychology. I suppose that there will be institutions, colleges, universities, etc., where you could study psychology in detail, and I'm sure there are applications in psychology. I'm sure it's a reasonably lucrative field. Um, Clinical psychology and behavioral psychology that has applications everywhere in industry, in various domains, uh, in the military as well, and so on. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot of scope for the field, but psychiatry is just voodoo. It's nonsense. And I'm sure there are going to be comments from certain people which disagree, which is fine. Please feel free to disagree. Uh, Muhammad Ismail says, are the Han Chinese colonizing and replacing the local populations of East Turkestan, Tibet, and Inner Mongolia? How do you see the future of the people of these regions over the next 100 years? Okay, so let's take a look at the map. And where's the map? 1 second. Uh, okay, and let us now remove that, and we are moving towards the northeastern part beyond the Indian boundary. So here we have Tibet, we have so-called Xinjiang. They called it Tibet Xizang or something. You have East Turkestan, Tibet, and then obviously you have southern Mongolia, which is under Chinese occupation. Uh, about 50% of historical Mongolia is currently under Chinese occupation. And like you say, especially in places like Tibet, the indigenous people are now a minority, which means that the Han Chinese have colonized the place, and the Chinese government has settled so many Han Chinese that the locals have become a minority. And I'm sure the same issue exists in East Turkestan, which is Urumqi and all that, Turfan, those regions. And Inner Mongolia, I'm not sure about the extent of Han Chinese immigration, but Tibet and Xinjiang definitely a lot. So how do I see the future for the people of these regions? If the Chinese empire, it's an empire, okay, it's a Chinese Communist Party regime, it's an empire. If it stays in power the next 100 years, then Tibetan culture will become something you will find in museums. And it means that there is no future for the Tibetan language and Tibetan culture and customs and all that. It will be allowed to exist as a boutique thing in some places, like the same way you have reservations for Indians or American Indians, or sorry, Native Americans in the United States and Canada. They're allowed to live in some parts of the US. They're given some third rate land to live on, and they live a life of poverty and addiction and whatnot there. Uh, that's how the United States and Canada treat their natives, the aboriginal true inhabitants, the true natives. In the case of Tibet, etc., you will see Tibetan culture being allowed to exist in, as a tourist attraction, as a curiosity, but not something that's widespread. So they're already forcing children in Tibet to study exclusively in the Chinese language. The Tibetan language is not allowed. That will, in just a couple of generations, destroy the Tibetan language. And the same happens in India. Kids are forced to learn, if they want to have good jobs and good prospects, they're forced to study in English. The same thing is happening in India, and we are doing it to ourselves. In Tibet, the Chinese are doing it to the Tibetans. And similarly in Xinjiang, I think something similar is happening. So if China remains the same the next 100 years, then these cultures will more or less vanish. And if they continue to exist, they'll continue to exist as curiosities and museum pieces, nothing more than that. So it's going to be a bleak future if that is going to be the case. Okay. Um, Run Vijay says, what's the current scenario of the Golden Triangle, especially its China connection? Who controlled it in the past, and can the West reclaim it? What's India's role? Okay, good question. Let's go to the map once again. So when we're talking about the Golden Triangle, you can see the map here. We have India in the center. Now let's go eastwards. The Golden Triangle is Burma, Laos, Cambodia. Burma, Laos mainly, some parts of northern Thailand, some Canada, Cambodia, marginally in there. So the Golden Triangle is this place, this geographical region where there is lawlessness, where there is little government involvement, and it is run by mafias and warlords. And um, the main driver of the economy, the main pillar of the economy is drugs. Mainly poppy cultivation and various other drugs essentially. And this is a region that supplies a significant percentage of the global drug usage. So in some places you just have cultivation of poppies. In some places you also have factories that actually transform the poppy, the raw product, into the finished material, which is heroin or whatever it is. Okay, I'm not very familiar with a lot of drugs. Cocaine definitely doesn't come from this, because cocaine comes from the coca plant. So we're talking about heroin and various other drugs that are similar to heroin, opium, heroin, and whatnot. Okay, I'm not very familiar with what other drugs come out of this thing. So it's all based on poppies. What's the China connection? How did the Golden Triangle happen? I'll not go into that history, but which major powers have been the driving force behind this? That's a good question. So, we know about the Vietnam War, don't we? Something that happened. Okay, let's Google when did the Vietnam War happen, just to be very clear about the dates and not do it haphazardly. Vietnam War. So Vietnam War was from 55 to 75. Okay, 20 years. So the Vietnam War is, why did it happen? It's because the Americans did not want communism to take over in Vietnam, and of course they lost, and communism did take over in Vietnam, and that's a different story. Now they also, during the course of the Vietnam War, they also bombarded Laos. Very big secret war happened in Laos. Tremendous quantities of bombs were dropped. Even today, people in Laos on a daily basis are getting maimed because of unexploded ordnance. Uh, and you had another disaster in Cambodia. Now, what the Americans did in these regions is they would go to the far off lands, the mountains, the hills, and all that, and they would convert people to Christianity. Uh, those people were called the montagnards, mountain people in French, les montagnards. So they would go and convert these tribal people, people who are isolated, people who live in the hills and mountains, to Christianity. And they did the same in Burma also. Lots of Christian converts, of recent converts in Burma, Laos, Vietnam, etc. And at the same time, the same thing was happening in India's Far East because of the great policies of the great Mr. Nehru. So Nagaland, Mizoram, Meghalaya, and other parts of the Far East were converted almost entirely to Christianity. The local culture was wiped out. They tried the same in Manipur also. A lot of that is happening in Arunachal Pradesh. So it's not just in India's Far East. This entire region, they've been trying to do the same thing, to control the region. And the main produce is drugs. So I think the Americans have a significant role to play, have had historically a significant role to play in the Golden Triangle. The Chinese obviously did not want too much American influence, so they also had their own pet warlords and their pet mafias who would operate in northern Myanmar, in Laos, etc., because these share a border with China. In Vietnam, it was not possible to that extent because Vietnam was very strongly anti-China, actually, weirdly, after the 79 war and all that. So mainly Laos and Myanmar. Thailand is a very strongly pro-US nation. They have no choice. So it was mainly Laos and in Myanmar that these drug activities happened, and much of this was exported to other countries. But now we know that it's also happening in Manipur. Um, the infiltrators who come across from Burma, the cookies, they have been planting poppy in Manipur and all that. So China is involved. The US has been involved in a very big way. And yeah, that's briefly about the Golden Triangle. Can the West reclaim it? What's India's role? India has no role in this. India has never played any extraterritorial geopolitical games, even if they may be to India's advantage. We have never done that. We have only allowed outsiders to mess up what's inside India. So India has no role in this. Can the West reclaim it? I'm sure the West is still involved in some way or the other in the Golden Triangle. Okay. Tejas says, I'm a student currently living in Germany. Can you tell, is it the right time to stay here as war is looming? What are the European countries stand right now? Look, war isn't looming, war is happening. It's the Ukraine war, right? Uh, I don't see this Ukraine war spilling over and crossing across into Poland, Hungary, and eventually into Western Europe, Germany, etc. I don't see that happening. There is a lot of hysteria in the Western media that Putin wants to recreate the USSR and he's going to march westwards. He's going to occupy Ukraine, and then the next target will be Poland, then Hungary, and eventually Western Europe. That's the kind of hysteria that the Western media has created. I do not believe that at all. Russia had no option but to do what they did in Ukraine because Ukraine was on the verge of becoming a or a member of NATO, or a de facto member of NATO, which means that you would have US soldiers in Ukraine, you would have US missiles, including nuclear missiles, stationed right at Russia's border. So Russia could not allow that to happen. That's why this war happened, the special military operation. And you may have noticed that they have not even run over Ukraine, even though they can. They have the military firepower to flatten Ukraine if they want, and to end the war in the next 2-3 days if they want. But they have chosen not to do that. They have simply occupied the territories that are Russian majority territories. And now it's a long war scenario, and eventually one hopes that a ceasefire will happen on whatever terms it happens. I think Trump will make it happen if things go well. And that should be it. So I do not foresee the war spilling over westwards. I don't see that at all. Putin is not a crazy person. He's not a madman. He's a very rational person. He's a very logical person. He's not a warmonger. He's just trying to secure Russia's interests, as every nation should do the same thing, right? So I don't believe at all that the war will spill over into the western part of Europe unless the Americans do something incredibly provocative. And even then, they won't make the Russians retaliate by invading Western Europe. If they provoke the Russians too far, it's going to be nuclear war. There's no other thing that could happen. And if there's nuclear war, it doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Germany or Madagascar. Okay? Maybe Madagascar is a safe place, actually. Safer place. Because if there's nuclear war, the Russians and the Americans will get involved. And that's the end of the world, essentially. Because the Americans have a plan that if nuclear war happens, no major country should be allowed to survive. Which means they will also nuke India in case of a nuclear conflict. So I would say that if you are fearful of war, then probably New Zealand or Madagascar may be a good place to settle down in. Okay, so my point is don't worry too much about this. I don't see any such thing happening. Hopefully. Okay, let's take some more questions from the comments. Luffy Soturo says, can you see any scenario where Russia loses the Ukraine war and the West wins? The only scenario in which I see Russia losing the Ukraine war is if there's a regime change in Russia. So either Mr. Putin goes out of power through whatever means, or maybe he dies. In these two hypothetical scenarios, the West wins and Russia probably loses. Unless there is an immediate transition of leadership to an equally strong leader, an equally capable leader. But if there's a regime change and a weak leadership comes to power, then this could happen. Otherwise, I don't see any scenario in which Russia loses the Ukraine war. Let's take one more question from the comments. Debarun Bhattacharya says, can the Achaemenid or Hachemonish Empire of Persia be considered to be the first true empire of the world? And why is the Roman Empire considered to be the original greatest empire by the West? I think the Achaemenids were much greater than the Romans. Okay, look. The Achaemenids were not the oldest empire, the first true empire. The Achaemenid Empire, see, the founder of the Hachemonish Empire, the Hachemonish dynasty, is Hachemonish. He is considered to be a semi-mythical ruler. We don't know if he really existed. And I don't know, when did he exist? Probably 1000 BC, roughly. So if that is the case, roughly 1000 BC is when this guy lived, the founder of the empire or the dynasty. Then the Achaemenid Empire lasted from about 1000 BC to about 330 BC. It was destroyed by Alexander the Greek, who defeated Darius II. So that's how long it lasted. It was the first great Persian empire. But that's not the oldest empire. For example, the Egyptian Empire, which we discussed some time ago, it was founded around 3000 or 3100 BC. And it lasted until 332 BC. Once again, another empire that was destroyed by Alexander, or supplanted by Alexander. He put his minions in place as the governors of Egypt. And Alexander became the de facto pharaoh of Egypt. So Ptolemy was the first governor of Egypt, and then he was the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty. So Egypt, the Egyptian empire starts around 3100 BC roughly. Then there's another great empire, the Hittite Empire, present day Syria, Anatolia, that was founded around 1600, 16 or 1700 BC, and it lasted around until around 1200 or 1100 BC. So that's before the Achaemenid Empire. And the Hittite Empire was of Indo-Aryan origin. Their aristocracy was Indo-Aryan. They spoke Sanskrit, and they worshipped Vedic gods. And their neighbors, the Mitanni Empire, that empire was founded around 1600 BC, and it lasted until around 1200 or so BC. Another empire, the Mitannis, whose aristocracy, whose royalty was of Indian origin, and they also spoke Sanskrit. And then you have other empires like the Assyrian Empire, 2000 BC to until 600 BC or something, and so on. So there are lots of empires. And when it comes to India, we don't even know how ancient India is. We have records of lineages of kings that go back God knows how many thousands of years. So when it comes to Indian history, a lot of it is shrouded in mystery and obscurity because of the burning of our libraries and our records and the destruction of our universities. So we don't even know how ancient our empires were. So definitely the Achaemenid Empire is not the oldest empire or the first true empire. There are many before it. Why is the Roman Empire considered to be the greatest original empire by the West? Because the West is Eurocentric. It's Western centric. They see everything from the perspective of their own greatness. So the Roman Empire was nothing great compared to other empires that have existed since or previously, but for them it was the greatest of all. So it's their perspective. Look, everybody sees himself or herself as the center of the universe. I mean, that's human nature. So the West sees the Roman Empire as the greatest. I mean, let them believe it. It's up to them. Let them be happy. Yeah, so that's how I see it. Okay, let's see some more questions from the live chat. 1 second. Let's remove that. Yeah. Okay. Deep Calmness says, can there be some other artificial pandemic or disease X in the future? Look, anything is possible in the future. There have been pandemics in the past. There could be pandemics. There probably will be pandemics in the future. Hopefully not in the next 100 years. But it's going to happen. It's a statistical certainty that at some point of time in the future there'll be another pandemic. The last great pandemic before the coronavirus was the so-called Spanish flu, which actually originated in China, where it was called the Spanish flu, which was around what, 1918, 1917, 1918, and it killed a tremendous number of people worldwide, including a significant death toll in India. So you're going to have it in the future. Will it be artificial? That could also be possible. That's also possible. Yeah. There's a lot of research that happens worldwide in various labs in certain countries. Virology research. Why do whenever there's an Ebola outbreak, Ebola is a ghastly virus, okay? It has a 50 or 60% mortality rate. Horrible mortality rate. So whenever there's an Ebola outbreak somewhere in Africa, why do teams from the US, China, etc. visit these places to offer assistance? They're there to collect samples of the virus, okay? And then they research the virus, and probably they're doing stuff with it. I'm sure it's being weaponized in some form or the other in some places. And if that somehow gets leaked or released, either deliberately or through accident, into the wild, then we're going to have a disaster on our hands. So that's how an artificial pandemic could happen. But even if we disregard artificial pandemics, natural pandemics happen from time to time. We've had so many in the past. So it's more or less a statistical certainty that at some point of time in the future you will have some other pandemic. One hopes it's far in the future, and one hopes that we will have sufficiently advanced medical technology that we can nip it in the bud. Okay, more questions. What else? Okay, since you're asking this question so many times, Valiveti Saurabh says, honest review on latest Sony Live show Freedom at Midnight. I haven't watched it, and I have no interest in watching it. I don't watch these things, man. All these OTT platforms with all their shows, I don't watch it. Don't have the time to watch it. And I look, it's not a topic that interests me greatly. Um, Gandhi, Nehru, the so-called freedom at midnight, uh, which was dominion status, not freedom. So I don't know what it's about. I'm not gonna watch it. So I unfortunately cannot give you my honest review. Okay. Pranjal says, do you think India should join the BRI? The BRI is not not doing well. The Belt and Road Initiative, uh, the so-called what is it? One one road to rule them all, one belt to bind them. It's China's infrastructure project across Eurasia. It's floundering. The Pakistan corridor, the so-called China-Pakistan economic corridor. What happened to it? What happened to the infrastructure? Is any infrastructure being built? Nothing is happening. And the CPEC and the BRI, what new construction is happening? What new development is happening? Nothing is happening. And this is the maritime Silk Route that is also floundering after the pandemic happened. So the BRI is kind of dead in the water right now. There's not much activity happening. Many nations have withdrawn from it. Italy withdrew from the BRI very publicly last year when Madame Giorgia Meloni was in Delhi for the G20 summit. So the BRI is not doing well. Why should we join it? We have other things going on, the I2, U2, and various other projects that we are working on. So yeah, so I don't think India has any need to join the BRI. Let's take some more questions from the comments. Okay, Bharat Sharma says, excuse me, what are your thoughts on being an entrepreneur? Should one have some level of entrepreneurial quality or qualities as an innate nature, or can anyone be an entrepreneur with specific learning and guidance? Secondly, how much does the absence of niche skills, knowledge, etc., affect the entrepreneurial journey? Okay, what are my thoughts on being an entrepreneur? So, what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a person, an individual who creates a new business. And that person, when he or she creates a new business, that person bears all the risks of creating a new business. And if successful, if the business is successful, then the person will enjoy most of the rewards, most of the benefits. And the process of setting up a business such as this is called entrepreneurship. So, entrepreneurs are essentially business people. They create new businesses. And they should play a key role in the economy. And what they do is they solve problems. Every nation, every society has problems. So what you do as an entrepreneur is you solve problems. You anticipate the needs of the people, and you bring new ideas to the market, and you bring new solutions to the market. That's what entrepreneurship is. So uh, of course you need to have some level of entrepreneurial capabilities or qualities. Some of it ideally should be innate, because look, if you start a new business, it's a risky thing. You're going to have to put up your own money in many cases. Otherwise you have to take on big loans or medium sized loans from others, which is again a risk. You're taking up a big risk, and it's like you're betting that yeah, this risk will pay off, and I'll get a big reward at the end of this. So you need to have a good understanding of economics, of finance, of how to manage your finances, how to manage people, how to manage an organization. And very often what happens is that people who have big ideas as to how to solve various problems, they are idea people, they are creators, but they don't have the grounding in finance, in management and all that. And that's why lots of these businesses fail. So you need to have some level of these qualities, or you have to start. Otherwise, the other option is that you start the business as a partnership. So you are the person who has the idea and who knows how to create the solution, and create the solution. And then your partner is going to be the person who will manage the business and manage the finances and manage the people. So you look after the technical side of things, and that person looks after the other side, the financial side and the people side of things. So that is a solution that can work. If you do it as a solo person, then you need to have all the skills within yourself. Otherwise, there's a high chance you will fail. So I would say that anybody who is reasonably intelligent can become an entrepreneur but you have to learn things as you go. Ideally, you should learn some things. You should have some fundamentals, understanding of the fundamentals before you begin. But a lot of the stuff you're gonna learn as you as you go ahead, as you create, as you execute. And absence of niche skills. How does that affect the entrepreneurial journey? You need the skills that are pertinent or relevant to the problem you're solving, or whatever new idea you're bringing into the market. If you don't have that skill or those skills, then how will you execute? How will you bring the new idea to the market? So that is crucial. Those niche skills are crucial. The standard skills, which is people management and organizational management and financial management, you can hire somebody to do that for you, or you can have someone as a 50 partner or whatever percentage partner. But those niche skills that are pertinent to the problem you're solving, you need to have those, otherwise you simply can't execute. So there you have it. Let's take one more question from the comments. This is by Pranay Paul 6361. Making an extra $10,000 is easier than trying to save $10,000. The sooner you understand that, the sooner your life will improve. And that's a quote from Elon Musk. So how valid is this? Does it depend on does it depend on the context of an individual and the individual's surroundings? That's an interesting question. So this is a question. This is a statement, a quote from Elon Musk. Now, what perspective does this show us? What perspective does it reflect? It reflects entrepreneurial thinking. It reflects high growth thinking. And what he's trying to emphasize is the power of generating new income rather than focusing solely on cutting costs. Let's say you have an organization, and instead of generating new incomes and getting more customers on board, you're simply focusing on cutting costs. It's not going to do really well, right? So, and the same applies to a person. Let's say you have a salary of $10,000 a month, let's say, which is actually a good salary even in the US. Now, let's say you have two choices. You either cut down on your expenses and save more money, or you generate another stream of income, which is an extra $10,000. What is better? I would say that generating more income is always better than saving. I'm not saying saving should be disregarded. You should certainly not have any unnecessary or frivolous expenditure. You should try and run a very tight ship. You should maximize your savings as far as possible. But on top of that, if you have an extra $10,000 stream of income, how good is that, right? So that makes sense. But the validity of this quote, it depends on the context. Okay, it is not universally applicable. It depends on your circumstances, the kind of opportunities you have, and the kind of mindset you have. So where does this kind of statement hold true? If you're living in a developed economy, which means that you have access to resources, you have access to people with a lot of skills, you have access to a lot of business opportunities, then you can create new income streams easily if you have the ability to do that. So if you are that sort of person, then it is not difficult for you to create new income streams. And this will definitely be more impactful than focusing on being frugal, on cutting costs. So let's say you have a job, but you start a side hustle, or you're investing in skills that will lead you to higher paying jobs, or if you're leveraging assets that can generate passive income, then all of that is gonna be much better than simply cutting costs. Okay. Now, so you need to be in that sort of environment. Okay, if you're in a poor country, if you are in a country that is not a developed economy, then how will you be able to do that, right? So if you have limited access to resources, if you're in a low income nation, if you're in an economically challenged environment, which is let's say it's a Western nation, but there's a recession going on there, then the opportunities to earn your extra money, extra stream of income may not be readily available. So in that case, the only viable strategy is saving money. So that's the sort of thing. So it all depends on the context and of the individual, the circumstances that you find yourself in, and the surroundings that you are within. Sometimes even in Western nations and high income nations, if there's a recession, if there's a bad government, you won't get all those opportunities that you would otherwise get under different circumstances. So it all depends on a lot of factors. But as long as you're in a good country with access to opportunities, as long as that is true, then making extra money is way better and easier than trying to save money and cut costs. So for that, I agree with him. Okay, what other questions do we have on the live chat? Okay, Daily Dose of Gaming says, how is Pakistan able to procure and develop high-tech weapons and defense equipments like drones like Shapur 2 and fighter jets like J-35 despite having financial crunch? Look, Pakistan, I haven't said this for a while, right? Pakistan is an artificial temporary nation. Pakistan exists to serve a certain geopolitical purpose in the Indian subcontinent region. Pakistan was created by the British to serve their geopolitical interests in the Middle East as well as in the subcontinent. After the British ceased to be a first-rate world power in 1956 thereabouts, became a third-rate world power, the Americans took over and they became Pakistan's big daddy. And for them, from the American perspective, India was an asset of the USSR. So then Pakistan had to become a US asset. So, so the reason for its existence is to counterbalance India and keep India perennially off balance in a variety of ways. And when the Americans lost interest in Pakistan after the war on terror, after Osama was dead and all that, then the Chinese became Pakistan's big daddy. And the Chinese also had the same objective for Pakistan, the same use for Pakistan, to counterbalance India, to keep India off balance. So the Chinese and the Americans, etc., at various points in time, have supplied Pakistan with various technologies. The Americans gave them F-16s, the Chinese are giving them J-35s and whatever drones and whatnot. So the Pakistanis they are getting this because they serve a certain purpose. They're not able to develop these technologies. They will claim that so-and-so technology was jointly developed with other nations. That's just words. The actual thing is that they are being sold these technologies. So that's the deal. Now the question is, if they have a financial crunch, how are they able to get this? So there are ways of laundering money and all that. One doesn't need to go into the details, but the fact is that, look, Pakistan has been defaulting on IMF and other loans, right? IMF, World Bank loans for such a long time. But somehow they're still able to survive. They're still able to find the money to purchase essentials, to import food grains, to import petroleum, despite having defaulted multiple times on various loans. How is it? How are they able to procure the money? Whatever way they are able to procure this money, they're also able to procure the money to buy this equipment. That's just the way it works. So there we have it. Karan Nalawat says, what's your favorite branch in mathematics? Algebra, analysis, topology, geometry, number theory, or any other? I think analysis, number theory, very interesting topics. I have a couple of books somewhere here by Terence Tao. Very good books. Number theory is good. I think all branches of mathematics are beautiful. Geometry is a beautiful thing. Topology, I haven't really delved too much into that. Algebra, everyone does it. Yeah, I would say number theory and analysis. I would say that. All right. Krishna Govinda Alfred Raghunath Buldeo Rai says, do you think the language used in the IVC stamps, Indus Valley Civilization era stamps, could be Peshachi Apabhramsha with respect to the traditional timeline chronology? I'm not sure. The latest research done by a gentleman called Yajnadevam, who seems to have deciphered the Saraswati Sindhu era script. According to this research, he's able to read what's written on each of these seals, and it's actually Sanskrit. So it is not an Apabhransha language; it is Sanskrit itself. Now, obviously, that research will have to be peer reviewed. There are very few people who can do it because he has used cryptological techniques, cryptographic techniques to decipher the script by treating it as a cryptogram. So very few people have the competence to peer review that sort of research. So it's going to take some time. But assuming it is correct, this research is correct, then the language in these seals or stamps is Sanskrit itself, not an Apabhransha language. I think the Apabhransha languages, they evolved out of Sanskrit around 1000 BC or something, around that time. Because when it comes to Magad, and the Maurya period, etc., we had Apabhransha languages like Pali, etc., which are derivatives of Sanskrit. So I think the process of Apabhranshization started around 1000 BC or maybe even before that. But when we're talking about the IVC seals, we're talking about 3000, 4000 BC or around 2500 BC. So the language in those seals seems to be Sanskrit. Okay, some questions I'm seeing that I have already answered before. Kardashev scale, Dyson spheres, all that. What else do we have? Okay, let me take one more question from the comments. Let's take a question about physics for a change, because I haven't done physics for a very long time. So Harjap Bhatia says, can you please explain the holographic principle of black holes in space? The holographic principle. Okay. So it applies to black holes. It also applies to the universe. So think of a balloon. You take a balloon, you fill air into it, and it expands, and you have a balloon of a certain size. Okay. So inside your balloon, there is a space. That space is filled with air. Now here's the central idea of the holographic principle. I'm using an analogy of a balloon. So everything inside the balloon, all of that stuff can be described just using the outside surface of the balloon. Essentially, it's like all the information about what is inside the balloon and all the instructions about what's happening inside the balloon are written on the surface of the balloon. That's an analogy. Now let's talk about black holes. So black holes, as we know, are these objects that that are dark, and they have an event horizon beyond which if anything enters there, it will never come out, even light. Okay, they don't let even anything escape, even light. So now there's something really strange about black holes. The amount of stuff, matter inside a black hole depends on the surface area of the black hole, the outside layer. So it doesn't depend on how big the black hole is inside, how much volume is inside. All the information about what's inside the black hole is encoded on the surface of the black hole. So that's the holographic principle. You know what a hologram is, right? A hologram is a flat picture that appears to be three-dimensional depending on how you look at it. So the same thing applies to black holes, the holographic principle, that the surface encodes everything, the entirety of the information of what's happening inside. And the same thing may apply to the universe itself, which means that there could be a layer outside the universe, okay, that encodes information about everything that's happening inside the universe. So there essentially could be an invisible or visible surface outside the universe that encloses the universe, and on the surface is encoded information about everything that's inside the universe. So that is the holographic principle. Now, Anupam Jaiswal says latest scientific studies have shown that black holes aren't just absorbers, but they've also been seen emitting matter and energy. This is called Hawking radiation. So when Stephen Hawking visited Russia in the 1950s or 60s, he met two scientists called Novikov and Zeldovich. Novikov for sure. And Novikov showed Hawking that if you apply the laws of thermodynamics to black holes, then black holes have a temperature. And we know that any object that has a temperature emits heat. And what is heat? It's radiation. So Hawking then came back to the UK, and he derived the semi-classical, semi-quantum solution to this problem, and he demonstrated mathematically that black holes have temperature and they emit radiation. They emit radiation, and radiation in the form of the radiation that they emit has a black body spectrum. It's entirely random, completely random, genuine randomness. And black holes have temperature. So large black holes are cooled, small black holes are hot. The larger a black hole, the colder it is. The smaller a black hole, the hotter it is. The smaller a black hole, the faster it radiates. So it can radiate photons, it can radiate protons, antiprotons, any kind of stuff, matter and energy, like you're saying. But black holes have never been observed emitting matter or energy. That is not correct. We have never observed Hawking radiation, never ever. Scientists at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, they did an experiment with an acoustic black hole. So it's something that's similar to a black hole. It's like the kind of like the vortex in a sink, and so they demonstrated that Hawking radiation can be a similar phenomenon can be observed in that. But that's an acoustic analogy for black hole. It's not an actual black hole. So this is not a latest scientific study. It's something that happened in the 1960s. Stephen Hawking is the originator. That's why it's called Hawking radiation. So yeah, we know Hawking radiation theoretically exists, but we don't have any black hole in a lab that we can observe. If we had a black hole in a lab, then we would be able to observe Hawking radiation, but we don't have it. So we have never observed this. But theoretically, it should hold true. That's what we know. All right. Okay, this is a question I took up, but I'll take it again. Akhilesh says, what can you tell us about the Russian missile to Ukraine last week, and are they leading to World War III? So this is a repeated question. So that's the problem with live chat. Lots of questions are repeated, which is why I'm taking questions from the comments as well. So the Russian missile that the Russians launched on Ukraine was an intermediate range ballistic missile, not an ICBM like lots of news outlets have been claiming. And it may or may not have been equipped with MIRV warheads, but non-nuclear warheads. And is it leading to World War III? Hopefully not. The Americans seem to be trying to provoke the Russians into starting World War III so that they can blame Russia. But Putin is not crazy. He's a very sane man. So I don't think World War III will happen. But we are dangerously closer to World War III than we were 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Maharshi Vashishta says, how to reduce air pollution in Delhi NCR? Tremendous problem in Delhi. Last week, I saw at one point in time the air quality AQI in Delhi was about 1,500 or something. It's the equivalent of smoking, 50 cigarettes in one day. Imagine smoking 50 cigarettes in one day. A regular person will go to hospital. But in Delhi, everybody is smoking that, including little kids, including newborn babies. It is healthier to smoke a cigarette in Bangalore than to do yoga in Delhi. That's how bad the pollution is getting. And is it because of Diwali? Is it because of firecrackers? What nonsense. It's because of stubble burning in Punjab. Possibly Haryana, I'm not sure, but Punjab for sure. So what's the solution? You have to prevent farmers from burning stubble. Burning stubble is the easiest thing in the world because you don't have to cut it and dispose of it. Just burn it off, right? And it also fertilizes the soil. But it unleashes this incredible torrent of pollution, air pollution, that chokes the national capital. So what's the solution? One solution is for the government to give farmers a certain amount of money for the stubble. And then you can recycle the stubble or do something with it, create bricks that you can pave buildings with or use in building roads or something. There are lots of solutions. You can convert it into ethanol or whatever. But that would involve the government either harshly prohibiting the farmers from burning stubble or offering them financial compensation for every ton of stubble that they cut and give to the government. But in that case, they will start raising prices, the farmers, right? Naturally, when there's a chance to make money, they'll want to make more money. So I don't know. Whatever the solution is, the government needs to find it, and they need to prevent farmers from burning stubble. I'm sure this can be enforced easily. I'm sure there'll be farmers protests in that case again, but so be it. I mean, the health of people is more important than these things, right? So I'm sure there are lots of ways of doing it. One way is to for the government to give financial compensation to the farmers for every ton of stubble they give to the government, and then you recycle it, turn it into ethanol, turn it into bricks or whatever. That's one possible solution. I'm sure there are other creative solutions that do exist. Okay, let's take a couple more questions and then we'll be done. So, what else do we have? Um, let's see something. Okay, McLevin says, why do Buddhists follow an additional religion? How don't know much countries that only follow Buddhism. What additional religion do Buddhists follow? Okay, if you look at Thailand, if you go to Bangkok, for instance, almost every street corner has a statue of Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu, Bhagwan Vishnu. Is Bhagwan Vishnu a Buddhist god? Well, Buddha is apparently an avatar of Vishnu. So, yeah. But Vishnu is also a Hindu god. I mean, Vishnu predates Buddhism, predates Shakyamuni Buddha, at least. And if you go to Thailand, you will see people worshipping Shiva, you will see people worshipping Lord Shiva, Lord Ganesh, a variety of Hindu gods and goddesses. If you go to Japan, you will find people worshipping all kinds of Hindu gods and goddesses with Japanese names. And they are apparently Buddhist gods. Benzaiten is Saraswati. Kangiten is Lord Ganesh, and so on. Lots, and there is Lord Shiva as well. There is Bhairav and whatnot, but with Japanese names, and so on. So it's not about following an additional religion. Lots of people disagree with me, and they can keep on disagreeing, but I don't see any difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. It's all part of the dharmic collective. There are so many different dharmic paths, panths. So is Vaishnavism now a separate religion, and is Shaivism also a separate religion? They have very different rituals and traditions. So are we going to make everything a separate religion? Similarly, Buddhism is also not a separate religion. It's just one of the dharmic paths. But foreigners have put this into our minds, in our textbooks, and our professors keep on doing it, that Buddhism is a separate religion. And if Buddhists also worship the various Hindu gods, and they are following two religions. What utter nonsense. It's the same tradition, it's the same path. So I don't agree that Buddhists follow additional religions. And in the East, in Asia, there's a lot of syncretization. For example, in Japan, you have a syncretic belief system which combines Shinto and Buddhism and Hinduism. And in lots of different parts of Asia and India also, there are lots of local beliefs that have been absorbed into the overall larger belief system. So there's a lot of syncretism, lots of animistic practices, and so on that get syncretized with Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever. So that's just the way it is. It's because it's a very democratic civilization. Everything is allowed. Nothing is not allowed. That's how it is. Okay, I think we have crossed way beyond 2 hours. So with that, I'm gonna end today's session. Thank you very much, everybody, for the questions. I know there are lots of questions that I could not answer, but that's why we have the future episodes. I'll keep on taking your questions over there. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good night. Keep asking questions all the time. Keep learning and keep raising your standards. I will see you in next week's live stream. Take care. Thank you. See you soon.